I was filled with pride the other day, and I really loved the girl for doing it. She jumped up onto the stage at the news conference in Dublin and told the boss of the Bank of Europe, get off our backs. And she was carried out of the place, giving the victory sign with a big smile on her face.
That, yeah.
She was a wonderful girl.
Yeah.
That's a way of introducing you to the Armagh Down Land League. I've got folk with me in studio, Dr. Finbar Markey, Michelle McKeever, how are you, Michelle? Fine. And James McComasky of Newry. You guys are very, very welcome. Who would like to tell me, first of all, what the Armagh Down Land League is about?
Well, basically the Armagh Down Land League is about, it's keeping people in their homes. It's on a humanity front, and it has no agenda whatsoever on a political or anything else.
James, what's the threat to the people's homes?
Well, the threat to people's home is when the bailiffs come to your door and the police and all the rest. But even before that, back that up, we'll say, like letters that's coming into people's, there's people living in fear of
the post.
The post. And hiding behind their curtains and so on, and it's a terrible place where there's no help, where the people think there's no help, and that's where we come in. We've been fighting the banks this 8 years. 8 years I have been fighting the banks, and like as I say, 33 years in business, and when this first came to my door, I knew I didn't do nothing wrong.
Yeah.
So I says, I started looking into this.
But you've been fighting the banks on behalf of other people very often.
Oh yes,
you've been helping people all the way.
I've got to the stage now, where not only helping myself but helping others as well. Yes,
yeah.
And that's.
I think,
Doctor, yes.
Yeah, I think it's important maybe to step back a bit, and I think there's probably a lot of viewers who don't even know there's a problem. And I suppose because we're at the cold face, sometimes we can presume that everybody knows what the actual problem is before we start talking about the processes of the problem. And the problem is that whether we talk about north or south of the border on the island of Ireland, we have a serious mortgage and home arrears problem. Now, in the Republic, it's highlighted a lot, and there's a lot of groups like the National Land League, we have branches everywhere trying to help people to stay in their homes. And we're talking about hundreds of thousands of people, men, women and children, facing eviction in the next 2 years, and that's no exaggeration whatsoever. There are 50,000 home possession cases in the courts in the Republic, and 79,000 more that are considered irretrievable that are going that way. And people, I remember 3 years ago at an eviction that we stopped in Dundalk, BBC One radio coming down to us. And it was at that stage that I started to look into what's happening north of the border. And I discovered in 2012, the rate of evictions was 10 times higher north of the border. And nobody's talking about it.
Yeah.
We discovered that, I did looking at the statistics, and there's a brilliant report just brought out by the Department of Social Initiatives for Northern Ireland, well, for the entire UK. And what they found was that the Northern Irish people have the lowest incomes, lowest amount of disposable income, and because of that, they were the most likely to go into subprime mortgages, which are the mortgages that are in most trouble now.
Tell me, define a subprime mortgage for me.
Is where these bankers decided we're not only we're going to give you a mortgage without a deposit. So you had all these brokers.
Are they still doing that?
Some of them, no, I don't think it's as popular now, but I think they'd like to get into it again. But in the Republic, there's new regulations now that you have to have a 20% deposit. But unfortunately, the legacy is there. So we have a situation across the border in Northern Ireland where more people are in trouble than in the Republic, and yet there's a lot less attention. And we have to ask ourselves, why is that? Why is nobody talking about it?
Hold that thought, because I want to ask that question of you in a moment. Michelle, we've ignored you up to now, I'm sorry. Michelle McKeever. Your function in this is what, Michelle?
Well, I'm a part of the Armagh Down Land League, and my function is to meet with people. We have an office in Ballybot House in Newry.
Yes, that's across the street from us, the red brick building, Ballybot House. If you've got mortgage difficulties, if people are coming wolves to your door, pawing at your door to try and get you out, Ballybot House is the place to be.
Every Friday we're there rowing from 11 o'clock till 1 p.m.
Friday mornings, 11 to 1.
Yes.
Well, that's good.
So we're asking people who feel that they have nobody else to look to, who are in mortgage difficulties, who are getting letters from their bank telling them that they have 10 days to hand up their keys and leave their home.
Is that been written down and sent to people?
It is, yes.
James.
And then, yeah.
It definitely is, and people are receiving them on a daily basis. But unfortunately, what is happening, Rowan, is, and I can understand this totally because I myself went through this. You get to the stage where you don't open letters anymore. You
Yeah.
don't answer the door. You don't want to answer your phone because of the fear, you know, of your home being taken off you.
My goodness.
Some people are, you know, they're that low. What happens then? It affects the whole family. We have people coming to us for support. Mostly it's people who are separated from their husband or wife.
Yeah.
They no longer talk to each other because they have nothing in common anymore, and all they can talk about is death. You know, the debt that they're in, you know, with the banks or with whatever they're in.
James, I'm aware of your constancy of caring in this matter. I've seen you,
Yes.
and I know you're deeply concerned. How would you, as a consequence of your investigations, would you sum up this area, for example, the Armagh Down area that you're seeking to help? Is it as bad as the two folk make out?
It's actually worse. There's more people now, because I talk to different financial guys as well. There's more people now coming for help than ever before. Even from the beginning of 2007, there's actually more people in difficulties now. Not what you would see on the TV, and forget about that, but the real figures.
Yes.
There's more people in debt than ever before. And the great thing about the Land League is to say, it's a drop-in centre there. There's a phone number there.
Yes.
You
Andrew
know,
will put that number on the screen for us.
where you can talk to people in the same situation.
Yeah.
But then we share valuable information how to get through this.
How do you get through it? Can you give me in a simple couple of lines what the approach is?
Hundreds of different scenarios there, but we'll say like there's a guy there, Seamus Sharlock. He couldn't make it here this morning. He's from Limerick, Newcastle West, and he's a farmer with 5 children. Right, this was about 3-4 years ago. Now that man barricaded himself, had to barricade himself into the farm because of the bank's actions. He was trying to negotiate with them, but no, they wouldn't hear tell of it. So he had no other option but to barricade himself in. Now, people like myself, Finbar, and other people that seen a man and his family in difficulties like that went down, and we stayed overnight and
For weeks.
and weeks.
But hold the thought, because
Right.
Finbar, ultimately, forget about, we can't forget about the morality of, or the lack of morality, what's involved in this. But they have the law, the fellows in the blue uniforms and the caps, on their side when they come knocking on the door.
Yep.
So ultimately, the person could end up in prison.
Okay. First of all, in terms of the assistance that we give, the first bit of advice that we give to people is to take your head out of the sand and address the problem. Start writing to the bank. This is what we do. We, on a weekly basis, have to go down to family homes and stop sheriffs. And we succeed every time. And we do it through numbers, but we do it through emails, phone calls, and what we have to do that way. Now, this is the situation. If somebody phones us the night before and says, I'm going to be evicted tomorrow, I've got 3 kids here, I don't know what to do, we go down and we have a presence. We can call up to 200 people now at this stage. We're quite good at this. But that's only as a show. So that when the sheriff drives past, she may not have answered her phone calls and emails before she drove past, or he, but they will. Now, up in Northern Ireland, it's not called... Because they've seen us. And then we can get into negotiations, and we've never, not one person that has come to us has lost their home. But we would far prefer if you contact us long before that.
Long before that.
We can try to get an arrangement from the bank where we can help you in your court situation, whatever it might be. Now, ultimately, you were saying that they have the law on their side, but the reality is, most British banks have been involved in fraud in one way or another. This is a matter of public record. So it's not
I want to say something there.
Yeah.
Amen.
Yeah.
Amen.
So it's about getting those arguments into court and to be listened to. Now, believe it or not, in Northern Ireland, you have a far more judicial system. that will listen to you. And if you go into a court in the Republic, it's unbelievable. You'll find it's packed. It's like something from Victorian Roman times, packed with hundreds of baying people trying to get the attention
I've
of
seen
the
this.
judge.
I've seen this.
Unbelievable. And how can anybody be listened to or get justice? So there is a machine at the moment stamping orders north and south of the border, and all we're asking people to do, as much fear as you have, phone us or call into us, and we'll start talking on your behalf or with you.
When the head comes out of the sand, when you start opening the curtains, when you start writing the letters,
and getting your life back.
Yeah.
Most important.
Is it? I don't mean this. I don't mean it. Is it that simple? But hear me through. Is that a surefire way of commencing battle? Write and record delivery the letter. Or make sure that you've got the evidence there.
You wouldn't believe the power of pen to paper. You can be on the phone 100 times a day to a bank, and they will send a letter saying, we've been trying to contact you unsuccessfully, because they want to make you look uncooperative to take your home. Okay?
Yes.
To speed it up, you have to look uncooperative. And you have no evidence whatsoever that you ever communicated. But as soon as you put pen to paper, the attitude and the tables turn, and you start realizing there's rules out there, there's codes of conduct that they have to follow, that I can't be railroaded, but that we could deliver workshops, we teach you how to read letters. Remember, I'm a lecturer, amongst other things. We do everything. We use every skill set that we have, from providing love and care and a hug and a cup of tea, to the paperwork, to whatever has to be done. Now, let's be realistic, Rowan. It's outside of the course that we're going to win. We are building a movement that's very powerful south of the border, but we have to build it in the north. It's a non-sectarian, non-electoral movement where people need to come together and collectively address the problem. The banks have conferences together, and they work out, how are we going to fast track all of these? We need to do the same.
We need our conferences.
We don't need violence. We don't need. All we need is to collectively come together. And the people of Northern Ireland, in whatever community they've been in, they have politicians who are wonderfully bombastic and vocalised on so many things, and yet not on this. And this is the biggest crisis facing the people of Northern Ireland. You know, you can talk about other forms of crisis, but when it comes to the lived environment, if you think you're going to lose your home, the amount of people on medication that come to us, suicidal, that haven't been able to look their children in the eyes.
This has got to be stopped.
Has to be stopped.
Yeah.
Michelle, your problem, you got through it yourself. How did you do it?
Well, I'm not actually through it at the moment, Rowan. I'm in the middle of it.
But you're in communication.
Of course, I'm in communication. And what I do, Rowan, is I go to the courts. I visit the courts probably twice a week to observe and see how the system works and see what is happening in the cases. And everybody has a story, Rowan, and their story is unique to them, of how they got their mortgage and how it was done. Now, the thing is, and what I found in the court cases that I've witnessed, there are things done illegally by the banks, by the solicitors. Things are not followed lawfully.
Yeah.
So therefore, you know, you could have a defence in your case if you're already into court. If you've ignored those letters from the banks, if you ignore the letters from the banks, you're going to eventually be in court.
Oh, yeah, of course.
They're going to take you for your house for repossession or family business, whatever it may be. So it's, again, you know, just what Finbar said, you have to take your head out of the sand. You've got to read those letters.
You read the letters, James. The physical structure of the organisation in Armagh and Down, what will that be? How will you have a representative presence in the high street?
Well, just before we come to that, I just want to say, like, you know, the information now that's available, and this is fact, Bank of Scotland, right, at the minute are under investigation by the Attorney General, right?
Yeah. No, I can accept all of that. I can accept, you don't have to prove to me the illegality of the banks.
But
I accept that.
I think it's so important, you know what I mean? You know what I mean? That what the banks have actually done, in some cases, like sold mortgages knowing that they would never be repaid. Deliberately.
I know they're bad boys. I know this. You don't have to prove that to me.
Well,
but you're now on the white horse. You're doing something about it. That's where I want to take it.
Yes. Well, okay. The Land League is vital for a first point of call.
Yeah.
And like everyone is at different levels. If you understand me. First of all, there's people for the first letter they get, and like they're, you know. So then we help them out and we get them adjournments. and get them into in a place where they can negotiate and get on with their lives, you know what I mean?
Yes,
And this is where it's all about. And everyone can come out at whatever level, but the most important part is to get their life back on track.
Absolutely. Finbar, you've seen it firsthand. The suffering of the people. You've spoken about suicide here this morning.
I'll tell you, there's a scene occurred. Last Tuesday we were in Kells stopping an eviction and it was successful without any fuss. We don't want fuss and hullabaloo for the family, you know. No. But there was one standout case about 2 months ago, and it was snow on a Tuesday morning, and there was another eviction in Kells. And we'd been trying to communicate with the sheriff, no communicate, wouldn't talk to us. And we got about 130 people down that day, that morning, down in the snow. But the night before, we sent some of our men over to the house just to make sure everybody was okay. And the wee boy was in bed, a 10-year-old boy. Now, the father's nearly blind and the mother has cancer. And there's a wee 10-year-old boy there, and he's up in bed, and he came down, and he knew there was something going on, and he knew it was about the house, and he started to cry, and our men were there. And the mother and father decided that they wanted to take him. Now, this is quite emotional. They decided they wanted to take him to their sister's house so he wouldn't be around when this was going on. And he clung on to the banisters and had to be dragged from the banisters, screaming, "I don't want to leave my home." Now, we thought that was a scene from Victorian times. And yet this is happening all, and most people are not even talking about this.
Both what you're saying, but what you're saying as you describe the scene inside the courthouse, to the child hanging onto the banisters, to people cowering behind curtains.
Yeah.
But we talked also about these smiling angels who are looking down on us from telephone poles, wanting us to vote for them.
Yeah.
What have they been doing about it?
It would appear nothing, and in fact, you know something, it would appear they've been suppressing it. In the South, they've been suppressing it, but we've collectively got together and are so strong now that it's the main issue. Yeah. There's an election happening here now, and you're talking about peripheral issues, not you guys, but generally the politicians are grandstanding on peripheral issues. And yet, the amount of people in every constituency who hide in the kitchen, and when they hear the letter on the floor, hitting the floor, and I know a lot of my training is in psychology and social work, and so every time when we set up a branch, we train our volunteers properly, and they have to go to other branches, high functioning branches to see, and half of what we do is psychological in nature.
Peter, I wonder, and it's a question which applies to all of you, when the pages of history come to be released, when the records are made public under the 30-year, 20-year, whatever year rule, are you guys going to be shown to be suspect, to be people who were under observation, enemies of the state? To what extent is that the case?
It is the case now. A lot of our more proactive membership will be followed. We know our phones are listened to. We have nothing to hide. We're only telling the truth.
But this is the government doing this.
We don't know who it is.
It must be.
We had a national executive...
Or agents of the government.
Well, we had a national executive meeting in Wicklow a few weeks ago, in the most secluded place you could possibly be. And we had some reporters there with us. And they had to leave the actual meeting, you know, as agreed. And when they left, there was a black people carrier with a group of men in it who were apparently sussing the joint out and were taking photographs of everything. So who is it? Is it the banks? Is it the government? But we need to press on. We don't get dragged down. We just get press on with what we're doing, you know.
Because there is work to be done here.
Big time.
We're talking about a serious moral and humanitarian problem.
Yeah, and economic, because the reality is that no matter how many jobs may be created into the future, north and south again, it all evaporates and doesn't become disposable income. The reason being, it's all been used to pay legacy debts from a time and place we all now know where it's crazy. Northern Irish house prices went up just as much as in the Republic, and was based on their factoring in was based on London prices, Manchester prices, things like that. And so we have a situation where nobody escaped it, you know.
And it's a skewed economy.
Absolutely, but as long as there isn't, we ultimately want to write down for everybody who borrowed between 2000 and 2011, the reason being, if we continue to agree, people who can pay it, they think they can pay, as long as they continue to pay, that money could be spent in the local tills. Some of it, the write-down proportion, the just write-down proportion, but instead it's going outside the foreign banking houses.
And they're also doubly crucifying people because even if people are paying them back, those people are blacklisted for life.
Absolutely, yeah. Or they're put into personal insolvency, I'm told, is not so bad in the UK as it is in the Republic at the moment. But the bottom line is, with personal insolvency, there's no guarantee of keeping your home. The banks can veto you in any type of personal insolvency deal. And as you say, you're blacklisted for a certain amount of time. The only solution is the simplest solution. The banks and the estate agents and everybody else purposely drove those house prices up, and knowing they were not realistic, but because they put some letters after their name, everybody believed them. Well, there has to be a cut in that debt. That's just it. There's no, I've heard so many complex solutions that might impact upon small percentiles of the people in arrears. We need it's not just the people who are in arrears. We want to have the people who are hanging on by their nails, but they've committed to themselves to 20 years of paupery because the wages are not going up. In fact, the wages are coming down, but inflation is going up, and so they're actually being squeezed more and more, and they've committed themselves to that. So we're only going to win this collectively outside of the courts if the people who think they're all right, because they're just about paying or they're in a short-term arrangement with the bank, they need to get on board too and realise if we collectively address this problem, we can buoy our economy, we can reduce our own personal pressures, and we can help those in the Republic, hundreds of thousands, and in here across the border, I'd say there's scores of thousands of people who are facing eviction.
And we're talking really all island based.
The whole island, the whole island. And the statistics are scary because 50,000 homes in the courts in the Republic right now in the circuit courts. Multiply that by the average of 3.5 per family, even though we know in Ireland families are a bit bigger than that. We're talking about hundreds of thousands, and then there's 79 plus more thousand to go in there yet. Hundreds, maybe up to 500,000 nearly. Men, women and children facing eviction. And we're more concerned sometimes about water taxes in the Republic and things like that, you know? So we have to...
To what extent, you know, with all of this going on, to what extent are people, and maybe people with influence and people who can make a difference, you, a good voice,
possibly,
but a voice in the wilderness? To what extent are you a voice in the wilderness?
Well, I'll tell you, somebody said, Michelle and I were talking about this earlier. I remember standing on street corners like a zealot 5 and 6 years ago, on my own practically, but just a few of us. And people would cross the road rather than listen to what we had to say. And in fact, I was up outside City Hall doing it, believe it or not, maybe 3 years ago. And I knew, and as our apostles knew, we knew that we would have to start out by being laughed at and ignored. And because a part of the problem is the people who are in trouble don't want to be seen with us, because then people will know they're in trouble. You know, that kind of a vicious circle. But now in the Republic, we have a situation where we are massive.
Yes.
And we are influencing policy. And like, when the circuit court is on in the Republic, we'll have 100, 150 people in silent witnessing.
Yes.
And if something illegal happens, people will say it in court now. And it's not, and so we're highlighting it right across the country, and they're now talking about it. We have to start doing it up here, because the statistics are worse up here.
You said you could bring out 200 people to any event.
With a day's notice.
You can now bring out 201.
Brilliant. It's great to hear that, Rowan. And the opportunity to be here and just to be able to convey our message is much appreciated.
Make this place your own. You're welcome.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Rowan. Thank you.
Thank you, James.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Rowan.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Rowan.